Welcome to the Lair of Secrets. Mind the crates. We're still unpacking season 4. Tonight we're talking about the role-playing games we're playing, the video games we're lost in, and the books we're reading. And we promise we're going to finish some of those real soon now. I'm David Moore, and I am planning a session 0.
And I'm Ken Newquist, and I'm documenting the contents of my brain for the benefit of humanity and my coworkers. Speaking of my coworkers, we have a new lunchtime game. It's Monster of the Week, which is all about tracking down horrors in a small New England town on our lunch break. And I get to play in this one. I'm not the game master, which is great because I've found that running 2 campaigns simultaneously is actually quite a lot of work, especially when they're 2 really meaty campaigns. But Monster of the Week is inspired too. And different systems, one of which I'm still learning, right? But anyway, Monster of the Week it's much more rules light. It's like a Powered by the Apocalypse style game. You've got different moves and things you can execute. It's inspired by things like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel and Supernatural and truly Monsters of the Week. So last time around, we had some sort of ghoulish thing that rose from the dead and was ripping arms off of people while a sinister fog descended on our town, and now I think we're dealing with the consequences from that. We shall see how it goes, but it's been fun. It's perfect for a lunchtime game because it's really light, and you can just kind of roll with it. So I am looking forward to it. I think we've been playing it for about 2 months, which means we've probably had like 4 or 5 sessions, given how our timing goes. But it's been fun. What are you playing?
Cool. I actually have that book on my shelf over there, but haven't played yet. I have been running short sessions of Dreams and Machines. I've played, I've run several learning sessions. I did get the full game. In fact, the last session I had everybody create characters out of the player's book, and it runs pretty quick. You can create characters pretty quickly. It's not like, here, pick this standard array, but it is, pick this archetype, pick this other thing. And then in those things, there are specific choices you can make to differentiate your characters. So even if you have 2 of the same, like, archetype and background or whatever, they won't be identical characters. So that's pretty cool. And the rules do seem pretty solid. Haven't played enough to find the flaws yet. I've played it enough to have things move pretty smoothly, and it does. So that's pretty cool. Had an issue with the GM's stuff, but the Modifius support fixed that. I got a new copy of a book that was missing out of the GM stuff. So
nice.
That was good. There are some issues with editing and some misprint stuff. Some of the page numbers in the table of contents of, I think it was the Game Master's book, is off by 2 pages throughout the book. Hopefully they'll get a reprinting of that at some point. And I am informed that errata is coming soon. Hopefully it'll be out by the time you hear this or see this. That's the session 0 that I'm going to be planning. I am planning on running it as probably our side passage game in case we're not running Cyberpunk. Although, given who will be in it, it'll probably have the majority of us, if not all of us, in it. In addition to another podcaster, which I won't name yet, who is also coming to join us. We may have to put Cyberpunk on hold for a little bit and run the other, or split weeks or something like that. We'll figure it out.
Once we have enough Cyberpunk in the bag. Right, that's one of our strategies this season has been to build up a backlog of our actual play sessions so that we can release them in a consistent way, and you're not waiting 3 weeks for the next one to come out. So, I mean, if we get to a nice pause point in Cyberpunk 2, we can just switch gears or however it all works out. But I gotta say, I don't have Dream Machines on my shelf, which is kind of impressive, actually. I think that shows a lot of restraint at Gen Con.
Yeah, it does. It does. Full disclosure, when I said that I wanted to, hey, let's go and run this for here, I reached out to Modifius, and they actually sent us a PDF copy of the player's guide so that everybody can read the player's guide at least. So that was very kind of them. So you have some Dreams and Machines. It's just not on your shelf.
I guess that. I think technically I might have the Quick Start Guide because I think I picked that up with the other Modifius goodness.
You did pick up the Quick Start Guide. So
I don't know where it is. But anyway, who knows if I enjoy it. Maybe I'll pick up the core rule books. Monster of the Week has been sitting on my shelf for years and years. I think
same.
God, I think maybe when we were still playing Scum and Villainy, it had been on my not Scum and Villainy, Blaze in the Dark. I think it had been on my shelf. So it was cool when the guys were like, "Hey, do you want to play this?" I'm like, "Yes."
Yeah,
there's a game on my shelf I could actually use the rules for. Wow.
We had actually talked about using Monster of the Week for our Army Corps of Engineers cryptid game. And now that I've played a lot more Powered by the Apocalypse style games and the 2D6 stuff, I think it would have probably fit a little bit better in some cases.
Yeah, I could see that. So I could definitely see that. Yeah, I'm playing a oh God, my character's name is Ben, and I think he's a spooky. I think that's the archetype. So he's got mental powers, and so I imagine he's the dad from Firestarter, who's just like focuses real hard to make people think things, and then he gets a nosebleed. So it's kind of been one of the running jokes. It's quite a joke, but one of the bits that we have in the Monster of the Week game.
Yep.
We're not going to talk Cyberpunk to death because we've talked about a bunch of Cyberpunk. I think at some point we'll probably have an episode where we're just talking about the upcoming season. But I've been spending a lot of time working on that, doing prep, and figuring out some cool stuff about mapping that I hope to do some streams for the channel at some point, because we've also been experimenting with our new gear, which we may have talked about in the last episode. But in any case, my other big game that I'm running right now is Dungeons and Dragons. My Elemental Apocalypse game is ongoing, and because I've been so behind the ball on a bunch of things because of life, my friend Bob had taken on running a one-shot, and that one-shot has basically come into a parallel campaign on the other side of Oreth. So whenever I am completely overwhelmed with work and being like, "Hey guys, I can't get to this week," we just do Bob's. So Same campaign, 2 different locations, different characters. They're not coming together yet. Who knows? Maybe there'll be a crossover at some point. But nice. It's been fun because mine's more like Savage Worldy, like you're on the edge, like dealing with monstrous, terrible things and giant mimics that take over caverns and what have you. And Bob is in the remains of the Great Kingdom, which is sort of like this one civilized area that had already fallen to evil, and then now is dealing with the elemental incursions, and there's deals with devils and all kinds of good stuff. So it's been a nice sort of like we're both riffing on the same basic idea, but it's been fun to see how he takes it, and then also for me to have my own character to play in that same sandbox, which is very nice. We do this occasionally. Like most of our Greyhawk games have included us rotating through game masters, but this one's really just kind of like tag teaming. So it's pretty fun.
We should talk about that at some point. Co-GMing or switching out GMing in the same setting. I imagine it's probably a lot easier doing that with an established setting like Greyhawk or Forgotten Realms or any of those, as opposed to like a homegrown setting that one GM has done the majority of the work on and then was like, "Hey, come on in and play in my sandbox." There's probably a big difference in how those games go. So,
yeah, I mean, for when we've done it the most, it's been Greyhawk, where we've been adventuring for the last 27 years, typically in the areas on the Beaumarge and outside of our homegrown city of Obsidian Bay, which we've also always been in. So gotcha. It's pretty easy to kind of riff, and I think the biggest thing is not getting your storylines entangled. We're not creating these huge world destroying things like we are with Elemental Apocalypse. We're not trying to step on each other's toes. So as long as it's more of like a self-contained campaign arc, it works out pretty well. But it just ends up being another chapter for those characters. But we can talk more about that on another episode. What are you reading?
Let's move on over to the library. I'm waiting on reading the next book from Stephen Blackmore, the Eric Carter series. Eric Carter is a necromancer who, in the first book, is just coming back to LA after being gone for like 10 or 15 years. His sister was just murdered, and he comes back to pay respects and find out what happened. And craziness happens from there. By craziness, I mean like Aztec gods show up and things like that. The spirit of the Santa Anta winds is actually spirit and sentient. So there are Chris Miller actually suggested the series to me. It's very much in a Dresden Files kind of vein, urban fantasy, more cursing than Dresden Files, I would say. And more dead things being reanimated and other things like that, because he is a necromancer. They burned through all 9 in a
Oh,
very
wow.
short order. And
Okay.
I'm waiting on the next one to come out. Should be this year, I think, is when it said. As my notes here say, similar to the Dresden Files and Feelings, but with a higher body count, which is very true. There's a little bit of like a mystery in each novel of like who is the big bad guy and how do we defeat the big bad person. But there's also other stuff.
Cool. Well, I might have to check those out at some point. I still actually have like almost all of the Dresden File books to read at some point.
Oh, man.
But I read the first one because I was prepping for a Fiasco game I was going to play in at Mepicon. And so I felt like I needed to know something about Dresden, but I really wanted to play Fiasco. And then, I don't know, I read a lot of books. We'll see. Maybe this summer.
Gotcha.
Speaking of body counts, I'm currently reading Alien: The Cold Forge by Alan White.
Okay.
So this is, the Alien, I like reading, I don't know, this is kind of like popcorn fiction, right? Like you just sit down, you read it, like you don't think too much about it. You just kind of like fight your way through it, or like you watch as other people fight their way through yet another iteration of the Alien universe. And so this time around, we've got a secret corporate space station, of course, experimenting on xenomorphs in the darkest depths of space near a star that could incinerate them at any moment. An auditor shows up to assess the science projects that are happening here. I have in my notes here, what could go wrong? Well, I think everybody can imagine exactly what could go wrong. I've read a couple of these tie-in novels. Some of them have been better than others. I think the worst one I read was, from a fiction standpoint, it was okay, but it was, from a continuity standpoint, it just irked me, was Tim Levin's the Alien Out of the Shadows, released in 2014, and it's set between the events of Alien and Aliens, involving Ripley's life pod, right?
Okay.
And another encounter with xenomorphs. And the amount of hoops they have to jump through in order to fit that into continuity, it just didn't make any sense to me.
Gotcha.
Like, you didn't need it.
Gotcha.
I don't need to see Ripley that much to have to like jump through all of these hoops for her to show up in this particular book, right? But this one was pretty good. I enjoyed it quite a lot. Well, I am enjoying it. I'm slowly making my way through it. It was on my summer reading list, and It's currently February.
Yeah, the secret corporate space station experimenting with xenomorphs sounds a lot like the setup for Alien 4.
Yeah, only that was the military, right?
I don't. They were trying to control and breed xenomorphs into, military stuff, but that was Burke's intent too.
Yeah, true. So, so it's got a nice little bit of cyberpunk tie-in. I think the best of the Alien tie-in books I've read was actually Scott Sigler's Alien Phalanx, which I think we might have talked about before at some point. But this is basically, imagine 300 with xenomorphs.
Gotcha. Yeah,
and Scott Sigler writing it.
That's one of those that I had started it and then for some reason put it down, and I have to go pick it up again.
Yeah, it's worth picking up. I think especially if you're someone who kind of enjoys that mishmash of fantasy tropes and like post-apocalyptic and, of course, xenomorphs. But I think he does something interesting with it, unlike some of the other tie-in stuff I've seen, which hasn't just, same old.
Speaking of the not popcorn fiction, because this one was kind of a heavy read. I'm looking for a little bit lighter fare on my next one, a little more popcorn to cleanse the palate, shall we say. It was a good book. It's The Three-Body Problem by, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Chixin Liu, translated by Ken Liu. No relation. Ken Liu's an author himself, but did the translation for this one. It is about... It's hard to say everything that it's about without giving away some spoilers that happen toward the middle of the book. You start off with one character. It's in the middle of the Chinese Cultural Revolution. She ends up being labeled as one of the intellectuals and against the revolution and is put into a work camp. And then some stuff happens and she gets put into this ultra secret radar base sort of thing. So that was way back in the late 60s, early 70s. And then we come forward in time to about modern day. There's another scientist who gets embroiled in some things, finds out that this woman who was another scientist that he had seen from afar, kind of had a thing for, finds out she had died, and the manner of her death gets him pulled into this big government. Not really a conspiracy. Turns out it's a multi-government group to go against a conspiracy. And so
Okay.
I kind of liken it to the Asian four-plot structure, where you have four-act structure, not four-plot, where the first two acts talk about one thing, and then in the third act, some really big surprise things happen. And then the fourth act ties act 1 through 3 together.
Okay.
And so that's the way that book felt. And I'll talk about my writing class in a little bit, but that's what we were just learning in the last couple of weeks. And it seemed to fit that structure, the way it read. But it feels like a lot of 1960s, 1970s sci-fi in parts, because there's basically two talking heads in spots that are just saying things back and forth, mainly so the reader understands it, because
Right.
the people who are actually involved with the situation would already know this stuff,
Right.
or are artificially kept out of knowing this stuff so that they can do this info dump. And those parts of it took me out of the story. But when the story was actually focused on the characters, what they were doing and learning about them, that was really interesting. I haven't picked up book 2 yet. It is on my list to pick up. And as Ken is highlighting in our notes, there is a Netflix trailer out for the Three Body Problem. I believe Three Body Problem won the Hugo a few years back. It's fairly well known in sci-fi circles. So this is one of those things where it's been on my list for a while to look into. And I finally did. And I wasn't disappointed. It was a good book. There were parts of it that I was hoping would do better, but the story is a good story.
Cool. Very cool.
You snuck something into the library that normally isn't here.
Yeah, I got distracted, and then I just started playing video games, because as one does. So my family got Spider-Man 2 for PS5 for Christmas this year. We're all big Spider-Man fans. We love the first two Spider-Man, which was Spider-Man and then Spider-Man Miles Morales, I think, came out like a couple of years ago. Okay. And so I got to say, this time around, we have two Spider-Mans. We have Peter Parker, and we have Miles. And in this particular universe, one didn't have to die for the other one to live, sort of thing. So we have both of them. I believe something Venom-like shows up in this one. I haven't gotten far enough into the game. My daughter was blowing through it over Christmas break before she got back for Christmas went back to college. So I lost a chunk of time there. So I'm well behind her. It's one of those things where I've been playing it for like 2 weeks solid before she got home from college. I'd gotten to a certain point, and then I had stuff to do, and then I'd walk into the room, and I'm like, oh, you're almost caught up to me. And then you come into the room again, and it's like, I have no idea what's happening. I'm going to stop watching you because I don't want to get spoilers. But I think the cool thing about it is that it takes place in New York City. This is the third time I've been there, like, game-wise. And it doesn't feel old. Like, it's still fun, and you're running around, being your neighborhood, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. It's like, were they going to have to go somewhere else in order to capture that feeling? But I think the fact that you have all of these different stories that you can switch between the two Spider-Men at any time, or I think almost any time, and play out their particular adventures.
Oh, cool.
It's a nice setup.
Cool. One of the things that I miss about being in college is all the extra free time. So, I don't miss the lack of money, which allowed me to have all that extra free time, but it doesn't surprise me that your daughter came home and then was like, I'm going to blow through Spider-Man. And did she finish it?
I don't think she did. She did. And she only has she has my old PS4 at college. I don't remember, because you can play PS4 and PS5 games once you have she may be able to play it there. I don't know if she's tried to set it up. I don't, because my account is, I think, on both machines. So, but now she's at college. She does not have time. Right. Because she's a junior civil engineer in her. Well, she's a civil engineer in her junior year, so she's got lots of stuff to deal with. Yeah. I have to say, it wasn't on our list, but the other game I've been playing the heck out of, desperately trying to catch up with you and Chris Miller, although I don't think any of us are ever going to catch up to Chris Miller when it comes to this game, is Cyberpunk 2077.
Yes.
I've been making steady progress. I keep getting distracted from the main quest, but I had rebooted it when Phantom Liberty came out. I was going to say Phantom Hourglass, but that's an entirely different game. But in any case, it's been really good. And I will say, it wasn't just because I was playing video games. I was also using it to try and understand the scope of Night City for the purposes of our Cyberpunk game, so I can get a
Yeah.
sense, because the as a little teaser for what we're going to have this season, that the crew goes into the city core. Like, how big is the city core, right? And although it's been all rebuilt in 2077, you can still drive down there, walk around, and get a sense for like how big it is. So it was
Yeah.
like actual homework.
Yep. It's pretty big. Yeah. It's still got a big feeling. It doesn't mean it takes forever to get around the map, but it's still got a pretty big feeling. And the districts are all feel different, which is good.
Yeah.
Because like
I think
different areas of a city all feel different. When you've crossed into another area of the city that has its own distinct, culture and set of people who live there and things like that. You can kind of see all those different pieces in Cyberpunk 2077.
I think the thing that it helped me most with is, as I was starting to write the adventure, I had this very much Escape from New York kind of scale in mind. But the core of Night City is not Manhattan.
No,
right? So
Night City
not
could be close to Manhattan
right,
itself.
but the actual core is not that big. So I had to like rejigger my mindset to realize, okay, yeah, they're not going to spend like 3 days trying to get to the core. Like,
right.
The Nomad can just get them there in 20 minutes because she's not stopping for roadblocks, right? So it's
That's
like, okay,
true.
well, if the
That's
Nomad could do that,
yeah,
what
not
other interesting
spoiling
things
what
can I
happened
put
in the
in?
last episode. It's going to take us more than 20 minutes to get out. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was unfortunate.
yeah, it was.
Um,
It was great. It was fantastic, and you all are going to love it when you hear it. But it was.
Yep.
We'll have to talk about it again when we get there.
Cyberpunk Edge Runners has actually turned into my put it on in the background sort of watch. You can tell that they used Cyberpunk 2077 as the model for the city, because a lot of the places they go and a lot of places David shows up is a anime / cartoon version of the Cyberpunk 2077 video game. And it's pretty cool to recognize those places as they go through them. So
I will have to watch it again.
Yep.
So you haven't been playing video games. You've actually been more constructive than I have.
Well, I don't know about more constructive. I mean, you are pretty busy and need to blow off some steam. But yeah, I had set a goal for myself, and I played a little bit of 2077. But other than that, I haven't really played any video games. I'm in my second session of sci-fi novel writing. That's with the UCLA extension. I've really enjoyed it. It's taught me a lot. The primary reason why I signed up for these is I wanted to force myself to write. I work really well under a deadline, but I don't work well under self-imposed deadlines. I have to have someone else set a deadline. That's kind of what I did here, is to make myself do that. There's a lot of techniques for world building and techniques deconstruct your story and reconstruct it, and techniques finding areas of your story and like doing a deep dive in there to understand how your characters would feel, would react, how they interact with society, things along those lines. I have also been very much what people would call a pantser, which is I write by the seat of my pants a lot. And this is really teaching me. What's that?
I have no idea what you mean.
This is teaching me how to plot ahead of time as well. It's forcing me to. So like the big thing that will come out of this particular class is what's called a plot grid. And it will basically plot out the entirety of the novel. Right now, solidly, I have chapter 1 done. And that came out of the first session, first 10-week sessions of it. One of the exercises, for instance, is like, look at your story, look at your plot for your story, and take the major element out of that plot that makes it that plot, and then see if you can heal the rest of your story around that giant gaping hole. In your elemental apocalypse, what if you took away the apocalypse? Or what if you took away the current big bad overlords? What if you took those out? What would the rest of the story still look like? And that it's not meant to be an exercise where you write it. in
Right.
that fashion, but it makes you think about all the pieces that are left behind and new connections between all of those pieces, because you have this big hole and this big gap you have to fill. When you're filling it with all those separate pieces, it gives you kind of ideas of, well, maybe you could actually use that in the actual story where you didn't rip a giant gaping hole in it.
Right. Right. So it's the idea that like there's these other side plots or subplots or what have you that are happening alongside the main one, and those are compelling enough in their
Yeah,
own
it
right
can
to
be
be able to
that.
carry it.
It can be that. It's um, another idea is the fur teacup, is kind of where the idea comes from. It's an art. It's kind of a surrealistic art piece,
Okay.
where this artist, and it was a while back, like before I was born, I think, when this was happening. They took a teacup, but then they covered the teacup and saucer in fur, so it can no
Okay.
longer be used to drink tea out of. And so it makes you wonder, what is a teacup? What is the purpose of this object? What is this object now that it is covered in fur, other than a piece of art? Um,
Okay.
so it's like doing something like that with your story.
Interesting. Okay. Cool. I'm interested about to hear you talk more about the plot grid later on. That's what you said it was, plot grid, right? Because
Yeah,
I
that's
know
that's what I understand it as.
one of my own challenges, aside from not being able to follow my own deadlines, is like once I've actually plotted out the story, I don't want to write it anymore
I understand that. Yeah, I
because
understand
I've
that.
already told the
There's
story for myself. Why would I want to finish it?
right. You and I have, you and I both have similar things with like ADHD and such. Of like, once, and this is a known thing with a lot of writers, is like, one of the pieces of advice for writing is, don't tell anyone the story that you're writing, because as soon as
Right.
you get it out,
Right.
like even
Right.
verbally, all that pressure to get it out goes away.
Right.
And so uh, this course is kind of helping with that as well, and mainly because of the deadlines for me. It's making me look at different parts of the story in different ways. I'll let you all know how it goes. Hopefully, in a reasonable amount of time, I can say, hey, come buy my book. But we'll see.
Oh, that would be
That'd
fantastic.
be pretty cool. Um, but we'll see. We'll see. We're trying to do shorter form stuff in season 4. And so we're going to take you out, which is, thank you again for attending our latest Minion and Future Overlord training. Come on over to lairofsecrets.com for a bunch of supplemental materials. And if you were sitting near the old Death Ray, head over to dice.camp and follow us at lairofsecrets.com. So we'll take care of you over there with because you'll need to get rid of those hyper gamma burns.
Always very, very painful.
Yep.
Have a good night,
Okay.
everybody.